Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4 and World of Warships Legends. Today I want to bring you a review of HMS Cossack, a Tier 6 premium Royal Navy destroyer. As usual, I'll be starting out with a bit of history, we'll talk about what I think about the ship in the game, hit on the commander choices, talk about stats, and finally finish off with a bit of gameplay. If you want to skip any part of this review, I should have left some time codes down in the description. The Cossack was a tribal class destroyer, so named because the ships were named after current and former people who were part of the British Empire, Canada, or Australia. The tribal class was originally conceived of as a light cruiser, but it went through several different design phases as Europe emerged from its shipbuilding holiday after World War I. The Royal Navy found itself in a situation where many of its likely rivals, including Germany, Italy, and Japan, were starting to build considerably larger and more powerful destroyers. Eventually, the Admiralty landed on a design featuring 4 twin, dual-purpose 4.7-inch guns, a relatively light 4-torpedo armament, and, which you can tell easily from port, was a fairly large destroyer. A total of 27 tribal-class destroyers were completed, 16 for the Royal Navy, 8 for the Royal Canadian Navy, and 3 more for the Royal Australian Navy. The Cossack would be the second of 16 ships laid down for the Royal Navy, and actually was put down on the same day as the lead ship, the Afridi, in June of 1936. She was launched in June of 1937 and commissioned into service 1 year after, in June of 1938. The Cossack very quickly sailed into history in 1940 under the command of Philip Vine. Then a part of the 4th Destroyer Flotilla, Vine's flagship would normally have been the Afridi, but she was in port for a refit. Instead, he would find himself aboard HMS Cossack. As a result of the exploits of Captain Hans Langsdorff aboard the Graf Spee, the Germans had found themselves in possession of nearly 300 merchant sailors. After the loss of Graf Spee, the Altmark, which had been a ship dispatched to service and fuel the Graf Spee, attempted to make it back to Germany, still carrying some of those sailors captured by the Graf Spee. Noticing this, the British lobbied the Norwegians to inspect the ship, and the Norwegians did so on 3 separate occasions, but not once did they inspect the hold of the ship, more or less taking the German crew's word for it that there was no contraband aboard. Now, I've run across different opinions regarding the legality of transporting prisoners of war through neutral waters, mostly because the Norwegians had not specifically agreed to allow such a thing to happen, but suffice it to say, the British wanted their people back. Ignoring Norway's neutrality, the then Captain Vine, under orders from the Admiralty, entered Norwegian territorial waters and forcibly boarded the Altmark, resulting in the death of 6 German sailors. Norway had the somewhat unenviable position of being both decidedly interested in its own neutrality and also being poised between 2 countries, England and Germany, who had considerably larger navies and armies, who routinely both violated its neutrality, and who would very coincidentally both perpetrate some fairly major acts of war against said nation within days of each other just 2 months later. In any case, the Norwegian response to this was to send a strongly worded letter in protest of Vine's actions. The Cossack also participated in the Norwegian campaign. The aforementioned attempted, maybe partial invasion and mining of Norwegian waters by the Allies turned strangely into some sort of Norwegian rescue effort when, just a day later, the Germans invaded Norway. She was present for the Second Battle of Narvik in escort of another legendary ship, HMS Warspite. Cossack would take some damage during the campaign, but she fared quite a bit better than several of her fellow tribal-class destroyers. HMS Cossack's next brush with destiny would be during the quest to sink the Bismarck. Treating the legendary German battleship as nothing short of a raid boss, a total of 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, an aircraft carrier, and 7 destroyers all sortied to fight the German battleship, and that's not counting all the ships that were late. One of those 7 destroyers happened to be HMS Cossack, and she was among the first 4 ships to engage the Bismarck on the evening before her sinking. Though several destroyers, including Cossack, launched torpedoes, they failed to hit the ship. In spite of this, the destroyers harassed the battleship throughout the night, helping to make the battle easier for the Rodney and company the following morning when they, fresh and ready for action, engaged a tired and demoralized German battleship. Though designed with dual-purpose guns, it had always been envisioned that the tribal class would function as fleet escort. The 4.7-inch gun mounts, though capable of engaging aircraft, could only be elevated to around 40 degrees. In a fleet scenario where other ships could theoretically cover the tribal class destroyer, this wasn't so much of an issue. But as they say, no plan survives contact with the enemy, and the tribals found themselves often operating more in the open or in just small packs, and that left them vulnerable to attacks, particularly from dive bombers. Indeed, during the course of the war, 6 of Cossack's sister ships would go down due to attacks from the air, many of them during the Royal Navy's unsuccessful Norwegian campaign. As such, the third dual turret, or X-turret, would be removed and replaced with a dual-purpose 4-inch gun, which could elevate to nearly 90 degrees. And this is the configuration you see in the game, with the 4-inch gun represented as a dual-purpose anti-aircraft mount and secondary turret. I know this is going to be a bone of contention with some players familiar with the PC version, where the Cossack has 4 turrets with 4.7-inch guns, rather than this. I have somewhat mixed feelings about this from a gameplay point of view, but from a historic point of view, this is the configuration that the majority of tribal-class destroyers were in for the majority of the war, and the condition of whatever remains of the Cossack to this day. So to that end, I do appreciate this representation from a historic point of view. It should be noted that as the war progressed, many of the tribal-class destroyers would also find their B turrets or second forward turret replaced by a similar 4-inch mount. The Canadians actually completed some of their ships entirely with this mount, and most of the remaining destroyers were augmented to lighter caliber weaponry after the war, including HMCS Haida. More thoughts on the Haida later though. Though I have already alluded to this, HMS Cossack did not survive the war. While escorting a convoy from Gibraltar to the United Kingdom, she was torpedoed by a German submarine. She sank on the 23rd of October, 1941, taking 159 of her crew with her. In total, 13 of the 27 tribal-class destroyers were lost during the war, with 13 more being scrapped in the years to come. One ship, the HMCS Haida, is preserved as a museum ship in Ontario, Canada, in her post-World War II configuration. As far as the Cossack in the game, my general thoughts are that I like when this ship can stealthily sneak into an objective and capture it. I like this ship when I can engage a battleship from about 11 kilometers and harass him, set him on fire, and make him worry just a little more about those torpedoes, because they're surely more dangerous in his mind than they actually are in the game. It might not be a lot of risk for the battleship player in reality, but it's more risk than a lot of them want to take. Where the Cossack kind of falls down for me is that you seem to either have to engage from longer ranges and rely on dispersion to save you, or if you're at closer ranges, you kind of have to give in to the fact that you're only going to get 4 guns on any particular target. And that can be a pretty significant disadvantage in a knife fight. By no means are you the largest destroyer at this tier, but you are noticeably larger than ships like the Jervis, Benson, or Akatsuki. The secondary turret, while a design decision that I could actually respect, would be a lot more impactful if secondary guns were even moderately reliable. In fact, this ship makes a lot of sense in a game like World Warships for PC, where there are aircraft carriers, than it does in a game like Legends. Particularly if I could choose between a speed boost and a defensive fire AA ability. In Legends, it makes a lot less sense, at least right now. In other words, the Cossack is, in part, a solution in search of a problem that does not yet exist. The other possibility is that they wanted to further differentiate the Cossack from what might one day be one of the only Canadian ships that exists in World of Warships PC, the HMCS Haida. That also makes some sense. And if you're really upset about the design decision here, certainly crossing your fingers and waiting to see if that ship is going to come out might be something you could do. It seems very likely that eventually that ship will be added to the game, and maybe the Haida will be the one that has 4 twin 4.7-inch turrets. In any case, that's sort of beside the point. As far as the Cossack in the game, I found that I won the vast majority of the games that I played in this, but I generally did a lot less damage than I was expecting, and a lot less damage than I tend to do in Tier 6 destroyers. My sense is that this boat favors a very thoughtful, patient, and aggressively passive, if that's such a thing, approach to playing the game, using your good stealth to push objectives and provide spotting for your team, while not actively shooting anything, and then providing fire support against mostly battleships with HE at ranges where they might consider it not particularly worth their time to return fire. You can hold your own against the majority of other destroyers in the game, at least at this tier, but the awkward gun angles do encourage you to put more of your ship on the line than you really should. The same thing goes for trying to bring your torpedoes to bear, though comparatively limited torpedo arcs are nothing new on Royal Navy destroyers. Ultimately, I have to look back to my initial kid review, and I come away with the same initial impressions of the Cossack, that being that it might be more worth it in the future than it is right now. Unlike the kid though, I just don't anticipate throwing an offbeat commander on the Cossack and getting a lot more out of this ship, so a wait and see approach might make a little bit more sense here. As we jump into commanders, I'm not going to pretend that I played around a lot with the commanders on this one. Since Vine actually captained this ship, I naturally preferred to choose him. What is also nice is that he's also the best choice for this particular destroyer. Sidestep is going to give you some advantage for ranged gunfights. Your base skill is also going to make return fire, thankfully, a little bit less accurate, so even if, for whatever reason, you want to take smoke on the water, you'll still get some of the benefit from taking Vine here. Also, since you have a lot less capability with your torpedoes, Vine offers the most variety in ways of increasing your gunnery firepower and survivability, and not wasting a lot of time at stuff that this ship isn't good at. With Turret, you have access to a lot of abilities that I normally really like on Royal Navy destroyers. That said, most of these are torpedo related, and I think you'll find that you simply don't have enough torpedoes to make this a really good decision. The thing that you can really buff is your smoke here, both in terms of number of uses as well as duration and recharge time. I'm not sure how many times this sort of stuff is going to be truly necessary though, and your chances of using 4 decidedly not British smoke screens in the game seems pretty low, much less your chances of using 4 or more smoke screens while also being useful to your team. The only other real advantage is if you wanted to take Fragile Threat, that could actually increase your stealth beyond what you'll be seeing with my build later today, though at the expense of your hit point pool. Finally, we come to Jellicoe, and I would actually put him second to Vine in terms of the most viable, being able to increase range, speed, fire chance, and all of these without the drawbacks that are inherent to choices like flanking speed, or rather be torching. Unfortunately, his base trait here is absolutely no help to you whatsoever, so there are some drawbacks. While we run down the stats, I'll be using this commander and build. And this is the build that you should see in the replay after this, so take note of that. I will also draw your attention to this being a double concealment build, which I suspect will be reasonably popular if you can actually do this, but it is one reason why you will see very low sea detectability on this particular boat. Where survivability is concerned, HMS Cossack does weigh in with 14,800 hit points, which is exactly 500 hit points more than the Jervis. Among Tier 6 ships, her hit points are actually comfortably average, weighing in pretty much in the middle of the pack. She also enjoys slightly better armor with 6 to 20 millimeters rather than 6 to 16 millimeters. That said, I wouldn't get too excited about this, except that if you happen to run into a ship shooting AP with 6-inch guns, presumably on accident, it should bounce against an appropriately angled hull. The Cossack has the same 3x2 120mm artillery layout that you'll find on the Jervis. You enjoy the same range, rate of fire, turret rotation, and fire chance. This makes the Jervis and Cossack look very much the same on paper, and one reason why these stats are often a bit deceptive, because though these are the same numbers, the firing angles on the artillery makes a big difference in terms of their actual usefulness. Further, the traverse speeds feel worse just because your rear turret doesn't rotate 360 degrees, and often has to double back to get around to the other part of your ship. The turret speed is the same, but the experience is very, very different. The Cossack does have a secondary gun here as well. It has a range of 4.7 kilometers, And if you take a moment to actually watch it shoot in the game, you will be reminded very quickly that the British rum ration is still very much a thing. When we come to torpedoes, the Jervis does enjoy a sizable advantage over the Cossack, though this is almost entirely due to the fact that she has 2.5 times more torpedoes. Other than the sheer numbers, the Cossack's torpedoes are at least as good or better in every way when compared to the Jervis. Unfortunately, the difference between 10 torpedoes and 4 is a lot larger than any of the advantages you're going to see here. Since she is a Royal Navy destroyer, you can launch your torpedoes sequentially, but you may find that even with max damage here, there are several battleships in the game that you can't sink even if you land all 4 shots. Still, she does enjoy a faster torpedo reload, shaving almost a half a minute off there. You do around 900 more damage per angry metal fish, and finally you have an impressive 10-kilometer range with torpedoes that are actually a knot faster than the Jervis's. The maneuverability of the Cossack is certainly far from anything special. In fact, you rate lower than the Jervis in turning radius, and this is in spite of the Jervis being the least maneuverable tech tree destroyer in the game. Essentially, you pick up 20 meters on your turning circle, though 610 meters is still tighter than most Tier 6 destroyers' turn. The Cossack and Jervis owe their poor rating almost entirely to their low top speed. One thing that isn't really portrayed here, though, is that the Cossack, unlike other Royal Navy destroyers, actually does have a speed boost, which ought to get you pretty close to 39 knots for a few minutes at a time. When it comes to concealment, the Cossack is very nearly the best in class among destroyers, enjoying about a 100-meter advantage versus the Jervis in base sea detectability and while firing in smoke. It is worth mentioning that, though you are likely to be among the most stealthy ships in the game, ships like the Asashio are more stealthy, and there are plenty others that come pretty close, like the Błyskawica. So, in the spotting game, it is very much a battle of inches here. I've already briefly hinted at some of the other differences between these two ships in mentioning the speed boost, but there are several differences between the Cossack and Jervis, or literally any other Royal Navy destroyer when it comes to consumables. First, we'll touch on speed. You have it. In fact, you have 2 of them, and they are very much your standard engine boost, granting you 2 minutes of increased speed. The smoke on the Cossack is also different for some reason. It isn't the type of smoke that you can count on in large quantities to be ready for use at any time. It also isn't exactly American smoke, lasting only 85 seconds, so essentially what you have is more of the default smoke field that you get on like the Japanese or Russian destroyers. This may be a good or bad thing depending on your perspective, but personally I would have preferred the Royal Navy smoke. Your sonar is also different, being about 10% better at picking up torpedoes and 10% worse at picking up ships. That isn't necessarily a bad trade, and there's certainly times that it's going to help you, though there are others that it will hurt you. But more important than this, you only get 2 of them rather than the 3 that you get on the Jervis, and they recharge over the course of 3 minutes rather than 2. Alright, so here we're going to finally get into some gameplay. Obviously we are going to be on Neighbors. Here you can see me just getting a feel for the lay of the land. I usually like to figure out who the destroyers are who are going to be opposite me because I found that that has a pretty significant effect on how I need to approach the game. In any case, we spawn near sea, and near as I can tell, that means that Destiny has decided I should probably take sea. I will give it my best shot. And I'm happy to see that I've got both of the battleships that are on my side also following me, which ought to make my life just a little bit easier. Heavy emphasis on ought to. So, moving up into sea. We're happy to see that nobody has started capping it before me. We managed to give away to everyone else that there is a destroyer on this side. And we spot the York out there at 8.5 kilometers. He probably would be coming into range of those battleships pretty shortly. And there you can see kind of the Somewhat awkward torpedo angles, and I'm just trying to get a feel for, are they going to go in front or behind this island? I think they're going to go behind it, but if I shoot right at the edge of the island, they might naturally fall into that path. I suspect that my torpedoes will probably reload before I really need them, though I do like to shoot torpedoes at other destroyers. I tend not to quite as much on Royal Navy destroyers because of those torpedo angles. And also, I mean, I usually fire on single file, so when I switch over, it's a little awkward. But that's just a personal preference. Now you can see we are getting a little bit more distance on that Colorado. And at this point, we can start to try to chip away at his HP. We're far enough that he probably wouldn't consider me the best threat. And if I'm just shooting HE at him, maybe he doesn't want to shoot at me. Obviously, you can tell that York had other ideas. But we managed to dodge the second volley, and at this point we've lost our spot. There's nothing really to worry about, at least not in the immediate. But I do want to get back out there. I would like to preferably be in front of the battleships for torpedo spotting reasons, but if that York is keen on pushing me, and I'm fairly certain that he is, then I think, you know, being out there is going to be maybe a little bit too dangerous, and I won't be able to help my team quite so much if I'm dead. As you can see, we're still sizing up that Colorado. He is burning, and he is on fire, and he is in danger of being hit by some more torpedoes. I let loose my second volley and decide that it looks like they have a pretty good handle on what's going on over there. So I turn towards the middle. Here's this Bayern, and it is traveling towards the middle. As a German battleship, of course, it's a great thing to shoot HE at because, of course, it's really easy to set on fire. My suspicions about this York are confirmed when he pulls away from pursuing that friendly battleship to chase me across sea. Maybe he's just doing his job there in terms of a cruiser trying to hunt down a destroyer. But as you can see, with our excellent concealment, I've managed to actually lose my spot. And as we're coming up on this island, I'm lining up a shot so that I can take basically a pot shot without actually risking being hit in return. This is probably not going to do a ton of damage. I actually do walk away with a few thousand. But it, most importantly, uncaps the base. Of course, he's still in the cap, so we're moving up towards this other island, and this is just one of those TacticAngel plays destroyers like a total jerk sort of things. We're just about to this island. I will have to turn out a little bit. I try to get as many guns on target as possible. As you can see, the shots towards the rear half of this ship, you can get 2 turrets there reasonably easily. Now we managed to decap him a second time, and wow, there's another island right there. I bet you guys can't imagine what's about to happen to that York a third time. He should be hip to the wise here, and I think he probably is. It does look like he's sailing towards the edge of that cap. And as you can see, even better, this smoke screen is still here, so we're going to try to make a little bit of use of it. And as we do that, we See that he's given up on the base, at least for now. We finally get all 3 of our guns shooting out there, and you can see the kind of angle that you need when you're shooting towards the rear of your ship. And the York ends up getting taken out by another friendly over there, which is great news for us. This leaves me in B in a pretty uncontested position. That said, the enemy team has taken the lead. I'm hoping that this Dunkirk is not paying a lot of attention to where I probably am, and I go ahead and put out another spread of torpedoes, all manually aimed. I probably could have accomplished about the same thing with a narrow spread there, but I do enjoy single launch torpedoes. Maybe a little bit too much. Unfortunately, there's a little buddy here who's coming in towards this cap. As you can see, we significantly outspotted him, which is nice. It doesn't look like his guns are facing this direction, so I start throwing a lot of hate his way. His front turret's now focused on me. That's not so bad. I have a 3-to-1 advantage here. And he blinds himself, as well as the rest of his team, with the smoke screen. At this point, I can engage the Dunkirk without any issue, so I choose to do that. If he wants to pop out of that smoke, then I'm happy to meet him. The Akatsuki is one of those ships that I can actually defeat with this ship pretty consistently. As you notice, I did pop my hydroacoustic, because every so often I actually do play this correctly. And as you see, I run right up the line for that cap. I don't want to give him an indication that I'm in the cap yet. Instead, we spot him a moment later, and by that point it's too late. He doesn't have any torpedoes because, of course, we just saw him launch them. Now I'm looking out at this Dunkirk. Though we have started to even up the score, the Dunkirk has a decent amount of health. And he's chasing down our cruiser over there, which is a Shores. It looks like he has a little bit of help from a friend. That being the one remaining destroyer on the team. Really the ship that I want more than anything to get out of the game. Now at long range you do see that those shells are a little floaty, falling in behind where I expect them to. Unfortunately, in spite of the relatively good range of these guns, the Dunkirk actually does sail outside of my range. I have chosen to start capping this base, and that is essentially because, looking at the points game, we are up right now, but there's a 3/4 strength Moss. There's also a Dunkirk, and the Dunkirk could possibly have some heals. Even though he was pretty low, you saw a couple times our Shore's hit points flash up on the screen, and he's not doing so well. I'd love to be out there helping him, but, I mean, there's also the point game to consider. The Dunkirk doesn't look like he's recovered too much in the HP department, but he is still closing in on that lightly armored Russian cruiser. No, I don't personally want to engage with the Dunkirk. The next ship I really do want to get rid of is the Moss. Now, the Moss is a ship that can definitely beat you in a gunfight. I prefer that he get torpedoed rather than the Dunkirk. And he must be trying just to inch behind that island in a desperate hope to save himself. And I'm not gonna lie, the entire reason I wanted to show this video was because of that moment. That was a Shores on 10% life getting a double strike with one set of torpedoes. And I would have been really happy to send that guy a message, but he doesn't let you send him messages. So, on the off chance that he's watching, just a fantastic job. Just a fantastic job. Whether it's luck or skill, that's a play that you remember, and I was gobsmacked by seeing it. Now, as we're coming upon the last couple minutes in the game, I'm just moving over here, mostly to annoy the enemy cruiser, to make sure that he doesn't get any more points. That said, I'm going to pretty quickly realize that I'm risking things that I don't need to risk. Really, I need to hold on to my points, and when I say my points, I mean the points associated with not having my ship sunk. And if I can happen to annoy this guy in one of those sort of parting shots, then, you know, that's good, but it's not worth throwing the game, right? So we're starting to line up our shot here. You can see we're approaching the island because our proximity indicator is telling me that I'm probably going to run into it. Pop and smoke. You can see we land an extra 4 hits and actually do decap him almost fully once again. Really making sure that nobody ever gets C. I capped it in the beginning, and it should be ours for the entire game. Some blind shots there. As you can see, that cruiser has decided to follow us. He's given up on the cap. I start to turn back around. I have torpedoes left. In this case, there's not a lot of time to muck about with single fire. Plus, they're probably a little bit more dodgeable. This is one of those times where I was thinking I might have made a mistake here because Japanese cruisers are pretty fast and Royal Navy destroyers are fairly slow. So we hit the speed boost just to make sure we get out of range. Just check up on our torpedoes there, and they managed to actually find home. We walk away with our second kill. 60,000 damage. We make almost 500,000 silver. This game is a little bit wonky in terms of the overall score. As you can see, 60,000 damage isn't exactly killing it when it comes to actually damaging enemy ships, but those 16 decaps help quite a bit, and come to think of it, I did capture all 3 bases. I think you guys know that that high total has more to do with those sorts of plays than really doing anything exceptional in this particular boat. In any case, fantastic job to Kaylee 1994 with the double strike, high caliber, and devastating strike on that Moss. In any case, overall thoughts on the Cossack. It is a ship that if you know what you're doing, you can definitely make it work. The firing angles are a bit annoying, and I think right now, without the presence of aircraft carriers, it's probably not all the way there for most people. Certainly the stealthiness of it, you can run around and play very tactically like in this game. That's probably its biggest thing going for it right now, because consumable situation's a little iffy. If you're thinking the 360 turret's worth sacrificing for a speed boost, I mean, I would probably disagree with you. I think probably most people would. But Cossack, those are my thoughts. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys on the next one.